a big challenge there. Yeah, and I want I'll really talk about that because I think that gives hope to people, right? You're
Yeah.
here doing what you're doing, and there's a lot of guys out there that are feeling down and out right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely down with that. So yeah, just hit the questions and I'll give you the answers.
Awesome.
Awesome. Any questions for us before we get going?
No, I mean, I've been listening to the show, so I mean, there's no rock unturned with me. So I mean, feel free to dive as deep as you want, and I'll expose all the answers possible. So
Okay, great.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and start recording on my computer. This is Male Entrepreneur Podcast, episode number 161, and we are live in 3, 2. All right, welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur Podcast, the podcast for men who win, with your host, Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
Hey, what's up, Nathan? I can't believe it's episode 161.
I know, that's crazy. That's awesome, though.
Yeah, I know. When you look back, you're like, wow, time flies. I remember having that first call with you about starting this podcast. It's been a while.
It has. It's been a fun journey. So we have instead of us just talking back and forth today, we've actually got a special guest lined up for this week.
Yeah, we have an awesome guest. I'm excited to have him on. He is the podcast host of Boss Uncaged. We have S.A. Grant here with us today. Thank you, S.A., for joining us, man.
well, it's definitely a pleasure for you guys having me on the show, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is great. I really wanted to have you on the show because of first of all, the person you are, the man that you are. And I love your brand. I love Boss Uncaged because I think that's super cool. I love what you're doing there. And we had a really good conversation on your podcast. And we'll talk about that as well in terms of what your podcast is about. But if for the listeners out there, who's S.A.? Because one of the first questions that Nathan has for me was, okay, is S.A. his name? What's S.A.? And so maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the S stands for Chanel, and it just kind of comes down to, I've heard Chantel, Shinobi, every other name possible. So just to abbreviate, to make it a lot quicker and shorter, I went with SA, and it also stems from like my graffiti days, and my graffiti tag name was SAGS, SAGS. It was a combination of both worlds.
So graffiti. So tell me about that. I'm interested because I was actually just stopped at a train stop here yesterday, right by my house, and I was watching all the carts go by, and I'm like, this is actually beautiful. All the graffiti that's on these carts. I'm like, does that still happen, or is that still stuff remnants from like the 90s and 80s or something? But I would love to know, is that the graffiti you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, literally, I've been arrested with markers in my hand before. So as a kid growing up in New York, that was just kind of one of the creative outlets that I had access to.
Awesome. So what would you paint?
So I mean, literally, it was back then for me. It was in the 90s, so it was all about getting up. How many tags could you possibly get up? Were you scratching it in glass? Were you throwing it up with paint? Were you throwing it up with markers? So I was more so of like a throw up tag artist essentially back then.
Okay, so I'm totally not, you can say, brought up to date with the whole graffiti thing. So it's kind of like you're saying, it's like marking. So you're kind of putting your tagline everywhere to kind of bring yourself up. Is that what it's like?
The irony is that I think my love for marketing started back then, but I didn't really know what marketing was. So essentially, graffiti is nothing more than marketing. It's how loud could you be? Where's the craziest place you can catch a tag and for somebody else to see it? Sounds a lot like podcasting or marketing businesses in today's world.
It's really interesting. I think that's super cool. I think that's an awesome talent. And I kind of miss it because back in the day when we were watching movies from the 80s, you would see graffiti everywhere. And it seems like a lot of that's been cleaned up. I don't know if it's still around. But here's the interesting thing that I saw on the carts. They actually left a lot of the graffiti on, and they actually repainted certain sections where they actually had to have the number of the cart. So I was like, okay, why not repaint the whole area? But it seems like they actually like the graffiti on the cart. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, which is weird because bipolar opposite, right? I mean, back then you would get arrested for it. And in today's world, they're called murals and you get paid for them. So it's completely different scope of work nowadays.
Yeah, it's so interesting how society changes. Nathan, you got a question, man?
Just to jump in, a lot of times I used to do graffiti too. I feel like we're kindred spirits here.
Yes.
a lot of times the car number, we would actually leave that blank when we would do our pieces, just because we knew if we left the car number there, they wouldn't scrub the graffiti off. So when we did the piece, we would actually leave that section blank just to be kind of respectful while we were violating their property rights.
That's smart. You're doing it the smart way. Okay. But this is cool though. I like this because I think that's talent. That's stuff that, you know, as guys, we don't really talk about that often. So that's really awesome. So SA, so you're a graffiti artist. So tell me about your life. Who are you? What are you about?
So yeah, I mean, I kind of segued in. Originally I was born in the islands, Trinidad and Tobago. Grew up in New York my entire life, and then now I reside in Atlanta. So on that journey, you know, I always say my parents kidnapped me, dragged me to Atlanta, and they threw me in art school because of my graffiti background. And then I completely fell in love with graphic design. And then as I was in graphic design, I was like, this is great, but this kind of seems like graffiti to a certain extent. Like, how am I really gonna make money with this? And then I dove more into the media side and got a graphic design degree. Then I got a web design multimedia degree. And on that journey, I was like, okay, these are great. Like, I see the principles and I could make money with this. But now we're just kind of on the journey of like, how do I scale these things? So then I created my own company. And at the time, it was more of a media firm. And then I kind of had the forks in the road, kind of things fell in front of me. And I became an insurance agent. I became a travel agent. I got my Series 6. And then I really realized that business was really like my thing. I was 50% creative and 50% analytical. So I was like, how do I pull all these different facets and these different elements and put it into a brand? And I was on the road. And I think that's when you and I were having that conversation about me having a stroke. I was doing so many different things for so long that eventually like my body just gave out. And then I had to kind of restart and rebrand myself and strategize something that was more streamlined. And that's how I came up with BossUncaged.
So that's cool because we're gonna get into BossUncaged because I think that's an awesome brand. But you just skipped over something that I think is really big. And for you, you've gotten past it. But can you talk about your stroke, if you don't mind? Like this is, and the reason why I say this is there's just a lot of guys that live a life of just go, 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 busy, putting more on their plate, stressing themselves out, getting stressed out, not getting help, whatever it is. And then eventually it just falls apart. What happened with you?
Yeah. So with me, it was kind of like, you know, I've always been a big entrepreneur in the sense once I realized the definition of entrepreneurism. So I was at that point, I had started building furniture and I created this whole brand. My son's name is Koi, and the brand at the time was My Decoy. And it was just kind of like taking bottles and taking things and upcycling them. So it got to the point to where this business had moved into like an antique storefront. And on the day of the stroke, he was building our back wall and was just kind of like a wooden thing to kind of showcase the pieces that we were creating for the store. And I didn't think nothing of it. The day was done. The wall went in. It was kind of a hectic, long day. And that night, my current wife at the time, I was going to her house for the evening. And on the way to her house, I, you know, felt a little bit off, but didn't think nothing of it. Got to her apartment and didn't think nothing of it. And then when I went into her building, she buzzed me in and I went to the gym on the way to her apartment and I started profusely sweating. I started feeling like completely off. And I was like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. Ended up hopping in the shower in the gym with all my clothes on. And I'm still like, okay, what the hell's going on? And I'm in the gym by myself. So to make a long story short, you know, that turned into me having a full-blooded stroke, a full-blooded ordeal, and kind of giving you the answer to the journey ahead.
Wow. And so what happened? How long did it take you to recover? What was going through your mind after? Because you have all this stuff going on, and then you have to take time for yourself.
Yeah. So I mean, what ended up happening? I mean, obviously, it's kind of one of those things that I was like, even fighting it on the way to her apartment. I had to like walk down like probably 200-300 yards, take an elevator, and I fell, hit the floor, didn't realize that I lost the right side of my body, the right side of my face started drooping, and I'm pushing through because, you know, again, mentality wise, it's kind of like, well, my goal is to get to her apartment to figure out what the hell is going on. So I finally got to her apartment, trying to put the keys in the door. Right hand wasn't functioning right. Got in the apartment because she opened the door and she was like, what the hell's going on? And I'm rushing to the bathroom. Long story short, she ended up calling the ambulance because I couldn't speak. No words would come out of my mouth. And I'm thinking faster than I could even create anything. Ambulance showed up. Next thing you know, I was completely gone underneath like, I don't know if they gave me something or I just passed out. Then when I woke up again, I was under the halo lights, and I was making it into a joke of like, I woke up and I looked up and I saw the white lights, and I was like, this can't be the end. So what the hell's going on? And I look down and I see them cutting off my clothes. I was like, okay, obviously something's about to happen. And then after that, I woke up in the hospital the next day with people telling me what happened, and they filled in the blank. So on that journey of having a stroke, you don't really realize that. I think that the greatest hurdle that is presented to you is the depression side. It's not necessarily the recovery of getting back your bodily motions or being 100% recovered to where you can speak and, you know, your drooping face. It's the emotional aspect of that roller coaster to realize that you're not going to be the same ever again.
Well, you seem like you're normal. I would have no clue. Are you
Yeah.
still like not 100%, or is there certain things you still aren't able to do?
No, I mean, I was like, literally, I woke up in the hospital and I had the determination. I woke up, I was like, what's going on? How long before I can get the hell out of this hospital bed? When can I step out of here? There was like, there's some things you got to do to be able to get out of here. And that's when I got hit with the reality that my right hand was still jacked up and I couldn't even eat. Food was flying all over the place. And I was like, okay, by Friday, because this happened on a Sunday and I woke up on Monday, and I was like, by Friday, I'm going to be able to use my hand again. By Friday, I'm going to be able to walk again. So it was more so mind over matter, and all those things happened. And then I left the hospital, and it was like, well, now the real journey starts. In the next 90 days, you may experience some bits of depression. You may not be able to speak as like the way I speak now as a native New Yorker. That's the way I usually spoke. But back then when this happened, I had more of a Southern drawl. It kind of slowed down my thought process, and it slowed down my speaking to where I had to take 90 days of recovery to be able to speak to where I'm speaking right now. So in that journey, I had an opportunity to kind of face the reality of failure dead on and figure out how to overcome that.
And how did your stroke then change your life? Did you operate differently? Did you do things differently? Did you think differently?
Yeah, I mean, it literally gave me opportunity to reevaluate. So literally, I had a Series 6. I said, to hell with the Series 6. I don't feel like dealing with FINRA and their dramas. So I got rid of my Series 6. I kept my life insurance because it's low maintenance. And then like my agency, I still have my agency active, but I'm really more big on how do I outsource and how do I hire the right people to fill in the blanks so I could focus what's more of my passion, which is essentially BossUncaged, which gives me opportunity to help entrepreneurs and also leave behind a legacy. Because legacy beforehand was like a verbal thing that I stated, but I didn't realize that, okay, what is my legacy actually going to be if I was to die on that day when I had the stroke? So from that moment on, everything moving forward was about creating this legacy to move forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think when we're confronted with our own mortality, when it becomes more real to us, we start realizing, okay, what happens after we do leave? What's the impact that we have? So let's get into BossUncaged. What is BossUncaged? What kind of work do you do? How do you help entrepreneurs?
So just starting with the podcast brand, right? I mean, BossUncaged is defined as an individual person, small business owner, entrepreneur, or even somebody that works for somebody that's trying to break out that cage. They know that they're a boss. They know they want to create something. They know they want to break out and become an entrepreneur, but they're scared to, or they don't know how to. So that's the symbolism of BossUncaged. So in that journey, obviously podcasting, I'm a published author. So all these different elements that I've been able to achieve, then I'm facilitating them back to the listening audience. Like when you were on my show, you gave my audience lots of insight about your journey. So scale that, step and repeat that. There's millions of people on this planet that have journeys that have been successful and have overcome failures. Why not put them all into a package? That way, anyone 20 or 50 years old has the opportunity to listen to a podcast and get that information to push them forward, to break past that fear factor and break out the cage and become BossUncaged.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the word uncaged because I don't hear that very often. And that's just such in a way, it's kind of primal, but it's awesome, especially coming, from a guy's perspective. It's like, yeah, you know what? I do want to be uncaged because a lot of guys, because we're speaking to a male audience, do feel caged.
Mhm.
They feel caged in
Yeah.
some way, shape, whether it's their business or whether it's a relationship aspect or just being, a guy in general. it's tough these days. It's almost like we're put into this cage. Hey, you have to be this specific type of guy, or this specific type of business owner, this specific type of husband or father. And so guys don't really get a chance to uncage themselves and be the guys that they want. What kind of feedback are you getting from your listeners?
So I mean, obviously it's positive feedback in general, but for me, it's kind of like I want to hear like more so like the questions of what I am not delivering on. Because I know for a fact I've studied and I've analyzed the market. So I know the general questions I should ask my guests to deliver that information. But what else am I missing? Because again, I'm not perfect. The show's not perfect. And on this journey, the audience needs to give back as much as I give to them and be able to scale and to help multiple other people.
Mhm. And so I've asked a lot of questions here, Nathan.
I'm going to ask, how much is creativity and artwork still part of what you do? It seems like at the beginning of the show, you said it was a huge part of your life. I know that sometimes getting into a business, we end up getting stuck doing a lot of the things that we're not passionate about. I just wonder though, how much does art and creativity still play into your day-to-day life and the things that you do in your business?
So it's kind of like the unforeseen bloodline, right? I mean, I see all the branding, all the marketing, like the cohesive brand of my book and my image and the BossUncaged brand are all design elements that are kind of overlooked, right? People see it and they're like, okay, that looks cool. What's the messaging? What is the content that's being delivered? What am I going to get from it? But they don't realize that they have to see the visuals to even get past that. Now, if my branding was half-assed or choppy or not appealing, then I already have negative marks against me. So to answer your question, it's everything that I do behind the scenes that people just don't realize that that's what's being delivered to them is the visual representation of things that are appealing to that target audience.
I asked specifically because the logo, that for the people that are watching the video, the logo in the background for the O, it's got a guy and it looks like he's breaking free. It looks like he's bursting out into the world. And it feels like it was very methodical. You planned that out. But I don't know if you created that or not, but I'm kind of the same way. I still love being in charge of the visual branding of the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, with the logo, the arrows coming in and out, and to your point, it was kind of one of those things that just fell into my lap. I was at a co-work space, sitting down, working right before a meeting, and I looked up to a whiteboard, and there were 4 arrows that were pointing into each other. And I was just kind of like, you kind of tilt your head and you kind of look at it and you're looking around and nobody else is paying attention. And you're like, what if I was to put a dot on top of that? That it kind of reminded me of like the old Singular Wireless logo. But that was like, it's more so about being internal and, to your point, exploding out, breaking out the cage. So it just dawned on me right then and there. And I was like, okay, I gotta go ahead and make this logo to represent this image. And to be honest with you, I made it well before BossUncaged even existed. It was just something that I had no use for at the time.
Nice. And then it found its way into your world. For the listeners out there that want to follow you or find more out about you, you mentioned that you do a podcast. Before we're out of here, I definitely want to give you the chance to let our listeners know where they can listen to more of your stuff.
I mean, yeah, so it's very simple. It's podcast.bossuncaged.com. I mean, that you just go to that address and you'll be able to find me and obviously there's other facets of what I do. But right now, if you go to that, you'll be able to have access to hear me and to hear other people like Purdeep and our conversations.
Nice. And Purdeep, if people want to check out more of our podcast, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, first I want to thank Essay for being on the show today, man. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. I know it's going to inspire guys out there because you're still rocking and rolling, and you went through one of the biggest challenges a man can ever have. So thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate you being on the show. For those of you who want to listen to more episodes, check out mailpodcast.com, or you could go to our YouTube channel by going to youtubeformen.com.
Awesome. And Essay, I'm going to give you the last word on this. If there was one thing that you would want our listeners to leave this episode with, what would that be?
Simple. Life is parallel to existence, but perpendicular to time. And what that really means is that life goes on forever, but in every intersection, there's an opportunity for your life to continue on. And the only way to do that is to leave behind a legacy.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Powerful.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
All the
All
best,
right.
man.
Until
right.
next time, we will catch you guys later.